Hello everyone, thank you for coming back to our channel. In this video, we will be discussing the next chapter manhwa comic titled Return of the Blossoming Blade or Return of the Manhwa Sect. Let's go to chapter 21. Enjoy watching this video. The Union Merchant Guild brought in a number of well-known medical professionals to assist in the treatment of his father. Not a single one of them was able to correctly identify the illness. As a result, as a last-ditch effort, he decided to send this letter to the people who were related to his father. The letter proceeded on to say that he urged them to let him know in any way that is most convenient to both them and the person who brings him information about how to treat his father's disease in any way that they know anything about his father's illness. This was stated in the letter. As it continued, he guaranteed that the Union Merchant Guild would make good on their debt to them by offering them a large reward in exchange for their assistance. The letter was concluded by the son of Huang, who said that he was looking forward to it and signed it with his name at the bottom, which was Zhonggui Huang, the master of the Union Merchant Guild. After Chung Myung had finished reading the letter, he muttered an expletive in the air and stated that there was no way that regular doctors would be able to treat it. Chung Myung had an intuition that it was the demon's flower, and he believed that this was the most likely explanation, because the symptoms when viewed from the outside are identical to those of severe poisoning. The medical professionals very certainly attempted to treat the sickness in a manner comparable to how they would treat poisoning. The demon's flower is a symptom that manifests itself when Chung Myung is attacked by particular tactics practiced by the heavenly demon sect. This is the most important reason why Chung Myung is acting nervously right now, as his anger toward the demon sect grew. Chung Myung gritted his teeth and tightened his jaw. He talked as he crumpled the letter in his hands and said that he believed that the majority of them had been eradicated in the Killian Highlands, which led him to believe that their lifeline was still active up to the present day. But that was not the only issue at hand. Not only were they still alive, but Chung Myung could tell from the very marrow of his bones that they were hatching a conspiracy somewhere in the Zhongyuan region. As his irritation level remained the same, Chung Myung cocked one of his eyebrows to the side. He pondered the possibility that they harbored some sort of ill will toward the Manhwa sect. After that, he raged at them, moaning about why they continued to cause them trouble. They had to pick Elder Huang to attack out of everyone in the entire Zhongyuan region. Chung Myung took another look at the letter. He sighed and muttered that the news was not good. Simply by reading the description of the letter, he is unable to determine with absolute certainty whether or not it was in fact the demon's flower. First, he must verify it with his own eyes, and Chung Myung beamed with excitement as he recalled that the letter indicated the enormous reward. As a result, he insisted that he go to them as soon as possible. Chung Myung is unable to conceptualize how impressive the tremendous reward would be, since according to Zhou Gul, the Union Merchant Guild must have an impressive amount of riches if such a guild is offering the reward. Chung Myung is unable to fathom how impressive it may be, and if the Zhongyuan and the demon sect had not engaged in conflict throughout those 100 years, he would still have been gone. The existence of the demon's flower can be unknown to a significant number of people. Chung Myung continued to think while he used his kai to replace the seal on the letter so that it could be closed. On that day, the heavenly demon massacred anybody in the Killian Mountains who might have known about it, but who can say for sure what might have taken place? There is still a possibility that someone is aware of it. Chung Myung's blood began to boil the moment he considered the possibility that those individuals might read this message. He cannot allow that to take place. Chung Myung started running once more with one idea preoccupying his mind. He cannot afford to give anyone else the opportunity to steal his prey. No, his patient. If it was about money, no, in accordance with the Tao, he needs to assist him. Some third-class disciples of the Manhwa sect who were climbing back complained that they were becoming tired of doing it every day back at the sect. And Zhogul, who was in a state of terror at the time, quickly shouted out to Yunzhong, who was standing in front of the other third-class disciples. Gasping for air, Yunzhong, who was looking at Zhogul, was thinking to himself that he didn't understand why Zhogul was being so immature these days. After that, Zhogul yelled that there was an urgent situation. The moment Zhogul spoke the name Chung Myung, Yunzhong's expression changed to one of grave concern, but Zhogul instructed Yunzhong to simply follow him first, which Yunzhong hastily did in response to Zhogul's instruction. The two of them eventually made it to Chung Myung's room, and while inside they noticed a message on the nightstand. Immediately after Chung Myung disappeared, Yunzhong inquired to Zhogul about his whereabouts belts while he stuttered. However, Zhogul stated that this was irrelevant to the discussion and instructed Yunzhong to read the letter that was placed on top of Chung Myung's bed. They then proceeded to open the letter and read the contents. Chung Myung's letter states that he will be gone in a few days. Because something unexpected came up, he requested them to come up with an excuse to their seniors and threatened them that if they skipped training he would bend their backs backward. Even a sketch of his face showing him grinning broadly while clenching his hand tightly was included. Yoon Jong's expression became increasingly aggravated as he continued to read the letter. Jogul, who was observing Yoon Jong's angry shaking, inquired about the next course of action. Yoon Jong said that for the time being they need to make sure that others keep their mouths shut about this. But Jogul argued that it would be awful if they were caught. After that, Yoon Jong crumpled up the piece of paper in his palm and stated that even if they told them about it, it would not make a difference. Chung Myung has informed them that he would leave in a few days, so they need to try to conceal this information as best they can. While looking at the crumpled piece of paper he is holding in his hand with an unhappy expression, Yoon Jong reasoned that if their elders did not aggressively search for Chung Myung, after all, there was no way the higher-ups would care about a third-class disciple. If they have enough luck on their side, they might be able to get away with this on the other side. Jogul has stated that he is unsure of what he would do in the event that they were discovered. Yoon Jong then questioned Jogul if he was concerned about that because he was concerned about something else. Yoon Jong showed Jogul a serious face and said that he was concerned about whatever it was that had prompted Chung Myung to be away for a few days. They were left with little choice but to ponder how much more trouble Chung Myung was going to wreak. This time Chung Myung had strayed so far from the Manhwa sect that he was now spending the night jumping from tree to tree. After Chung Myung had successfully landed on the ground, he began to breathe more heavily. He remarked that he has to take a moment to compose himself first after completing the task of sprinting 300 lists in one go. Beginning from the temple of the Manhwa sect, his mouth felt extremely dry and he was fatigued. He questioned whether or not it was still too much for his body at this point. After that, he began to believe that when he was at the peak of his athletic ability, a single leap was sufficient for him to vault over an entire mountain, and that he could get across an entire river with just 2 hops. Even if he had walked at a leisurely pace, getting there would not have taken him very long at all. Chung Myung wiped the sweat that was on his face and commented that it had been a while since he had been there. He was taken in the sights of the brightly lit city. It turned out to be the city of Zion. He made the remark that he too had many memories associated with that location. While he was drinking alcohol in the street, he was making the remark that there was nothing better than to avoid being spotted by his senior while he was drinking and acting recklessly on the street. He accidentally caused one of the men who was walking in the street to drop his bottle of alcohol because he accidentally bumped into him. Chung Myung was then instructed by the man who had bumped into him that he was to apologize whenever he accidentally ran into another person. He also mentioned that he had a foul odor coming from somewhere, and it turned out that it was coming from the Manhwa sect. That is the end of chapter 21, so now let's next to chapter 22. When Chung Myung heard this, he did not appreciate it while all of this was going on. Chung Myung remained mute while the alcohol that was already on the ground continued to be spilled there. Chung Myung made a statement and instructed the males to retrieve the alcoholic bottle. However, the man just laughed and stated that he guessed that everyone from the Manhwa sect was the same. He continued by stating that he guessed that the members of the Manhwa sect had no basic manners. They then proceeded to explain to Chung Myung that the Southern Edge sect would provide him with a brief education regarding the consequences that result from someone messing in their yard. Chung Myung then became very serious, kicking the bottle of alcohol into the air. Before any of them even realized what was happening, Chung Myung had already hit each and every one of them, and after it was all over, Chung Myung managed to get his hands on the alcohol while the other disciples from the Southern Edge sect collapsed. The Southern Edge sect and the Manhwa sect are practically considered to be mortal adversaries of one another. Why? Because it is only natural for large sect that are geographically close to each other to be bitter rivals. Due to the parallels between the two, particularly the fact that they are both Taoist sect and that they both employ sword methods, there was a great deal of competition between the two, and every time there was a disagreement over which sect was more powerful, it instantly escalated into a sword fight between the two sides, because it was a contest between two people's senses of pride. Those who belonged to the Manhwa sect were aware of this fact, and as a result they did their best to avoid a confrontation with members of the Southern Edge sect, which meant they should avoid going to Shanksa. Despite the fact that this was not true for Chung Myung, he certainly seems to think so based on the smug grin on his face. Chung Myung had no choice but to go to Shanksa, because it was the best area for him to conceal his antics from his elders. While he was in Shanksa, and he had no other option, even though he was involved in quite a few altercations, he was never the aggressor in any of them. They were only approaching him with the intention of picking a fight. When he thinks back on it, now he realizes that they were really persistent. They continued to circle back around to him. after being battered to the point where they were close to dying, as if getting pummeled was some kind of hobby for them. They were psychotic individuals who made a beeline for him. The moment they determined that he belonged to the Manhwa sect, and it's likely that this dogged determination was a significant element in the Southern Edge sect developing into what it is today. Because of this, he had the impression that a significant problem would arise if he confronted them. But Chung Myung of course laughed off his concerns as if they were nothing, insisting that everything would be all right. In the end, it is not as though they are actively searching for him as they did in his previous existence. On the other hand, a physician who was examining Elder Huang's condition and advising Jung-gui that it would be difficult. After being informed of this, Jung-gui will let out a deep sigh. He inquired of the physician whether or not he was claiming that even a doctor who hailed from the Sichuan-Tan family, which was known as the Master of Poisons, was unable to treat his father. The physician said that it was indeed the case that his family's knowledge of poisons was unparalleled anywhere else in the entire world. According to what he shared with Jung-gui, however, Elder Huang's illness is not the result of poison. This shocked Jung-gui as well as the doctor, who continued by saying that even though it has the appearance of poisoning, it is not brought on by poison. He confided in Jung-gui that he had a sneaking suspicion that there was a more fundamental reason behind this. Jung-gui grabbed the doctor's sleeves in a desperate attempt to get his attention, and then he asked the doctor what illness he was considering. After Jung-gui understood what he had done, he immediately apologized to the doctor and explained that the motivation behind his actions was impatience. The physician also expressed regret, stating that he was unable to be of any further assistance to the patient. As Jung-gui sat on the chair next to his father, he was lost in deep concentration the entire time. What actions should he take in response to this, even with the vast wealth at his disposal? He is powerless to improve his father's condition, which is rapidly deteriorating despite the fact that he is unable to take any action. His father had devoted his entire life to helping those who were less fortunate, and now, after a year-long battle with a mysterious illness, he is going to pass away. Isn't that a little too severe? As Jung-gui sat on the chair next to his father, he was lost in deep concentration the entire time despite the fact. He suddenly heard a voice from behind the door, telling him that he would open the door. It was an elderly member of the Southern Edge sect named Moksuyang. He entered the room and announced, without displaying any sign of emotion on his face, that he should accept the truth and that the only way to save Elder Huang would be through the performance of a Taoist ceremony. After a brief period of silence, Jung-gui broke it by stating that he was aware of what the other person meant, but that he did not intend to rely on anything of the sort just yet. Moksuyang then explained that it was not typical for the leader of the Great Southern Edge sect to volunteer to do the ritual himself, and that the only reason they were given such treatment was because the patient was an Elder Huang from the Union Merchant Guild. Jung-gui, on the other hand, did not back down. Even after Moksuyang said so to him, he denied that the letters that he had sent had not received any responses as of yet. Moksuyang clicked his tongue, overlaying what Jung-gui was saying, and claimed that it was pointless. As Jung-gui continued to speak in his state of fury, was powerless to do anything but maintain control over himself. While he was trying to calm himself down, he closed his eyes. It was rude, but the explanation for why he was powerless to take any action, even after something like that, was straightforward. The reason for this particular individual, Moksuyang, is an elder of the Southern Edge sect, which has been well known for a considerable amount of time as one of the 10 great sects, and in more recent times it has evolved into an unstoppable force that is leaving its imprint all over the world. It would not be an exaggeration to suggest that it will become one of the finest swordsmanship sect in the world, if this practice is maintained for a couple more generations. In fact, it is already on its way to being one of the greatest. Since the beginning of recorded history, the Southern Edge sect has wielded an immense amount of power over Shaanxi. When an elder of such a sect is deliberating over a matter, the son of the guild master cannot in any way contradict what the elder decides. As Jung-gui continued to think, the thought that they would most likely seek fortune as payment for the ritual caused him to clench his fist in anger. In fact, though the matter at hand was not one of financial concern, if it meant he could save his father, he was willing to give up everything he owned as a sacrifice. However, if they are so certain that the ritual can rescue his father, then they would have asked for money after they had successfully performed the ritual and saved his father. This indicates that they are after something else. Moksuyang started to speak and said that he found the situation to be very annoying, but before he could even complete speaking, someone shouted from outside the door, calling Jung-gui. After opening the door, Jung-gui asked the other person what the problem was. The reply from the man was that a member of the Manhwa sect had arrived. This caused Jung-gui to be perplexed, because the Manhwa sect was the very last location to which he had sent a letter. Jungui's calculations suggest that it ought to have arrived not too long ago, and yet there is already someone present in that location. Mok Soyang then spoke out and inquired as to whether or not they were referring to the Mount Hua sect. That was on the verge of disintegrating. He went on to say that they must be conspiring about something, adding that talking to them would be a waste of time. Mok Soyang attempted to stop Jongui by laying his hand on Jonggui's shoulder. He proceeded by saying that there was no need for Jongui to meet someone like him, and by asking Jongui if he truly believes that someone from the Mount Hua sect can cure his father. Jongui then looked at Mok Soyang with conviction, and stated that since they had come after receiving Jongui's call for assistance, he did not see how he could just send them away without at least offering them appropriate greetings. After being rendered speechless as a result of this, Mok Soyang pretended to cough. After that, Jongui makes a hasty approach to the door, where a member of the Mount Hua sect is waiting for him. Therefore, as soon as they opened the gate from the front door, Jongui instantly apologizes for treating the guy who is waiting outside with the stain and then introduces himself. However, the individual stated that he was aware of the situation and that he did not go to that location with the expectation of receiving hospitality. Chung Myung was the one who exhibited signs of boredom by scratching his ears. Jonggui's reaction upon seeing Chung Myung was one of surprise, and as a result he questioned the man about the presence of any other individuals with him. However, Chung Myung stated that he only came by himself, which caused Jongui to get perplexed. He continued by saying that he knew how to heal Elder Huang, while flapping his right hand to indicate that he would lead the way and that he would like to see the huge reward that was mentioned in the letter. He asked if that would be okay, saying that he would like to see it. This just served to further perplex Jongui, while Chung Myung's expression became even more contorted at the thought of the reward. That is the end of chapter 22, so now let's next to chapter 23. Because of this, Jongui was completely perplexed and he questioned if the Mount Hua sect was looking down on the Union Merchant Guild or not. Mok Soyang chuckled sarcastically as he followed behind Jongui, and he continued by telling Jongui that he had previously informed him that it would be a complete waste of time to speak with a member of the Mount Hua sect. He continued to make fun of them by claiming that despite the fact that they were ignorant, they were still determined to achieve something. On the other hand, given that they did not like to expose themselves to the possibility of looking like fools by coming here, they instead dispatched a youth. Chung Myung, on the other hand, shrugged it off and thought that he was used to being treated in this manner because he looked so young. That being the case, he reasoned that he taught to ratchet up Jongui's anticipation even further. After bowing and apologizing for the tardiness of the greeting, Chung Myung then introduced himself and stated that the letter they had delivered had been received favorably by the other party. In addition, he explained to them that the reason he was there was because he believed they knew something about the illness that Jongui's father is suffering from based on the symptoms that were outlined in the letter. When Jongui heard this, he was taken aback. That is why he tried to question Chung Myung a second time if what he was saying was actually accurate, since he could not simply believe it, to which Chung Myung gave confirmation that he was right. Despite this, Jongui continues to find it hard to believe it was the first time someone had ever stated something even remotely similar to that. Jongui could not help but shake as he thinks many well-known physicians and experts have previously visited them, but not a single one of them was able to talk about his father's condition even before they met him. However, even though Jongui had his doubts, he still hoped that Chung Myung would be able to assist in his father's recovery. Before Jongui could even say anything, Mok Soyang had already walked forward and was laughing at Chung Myung's statement. Mosing accused Chung Myung of deceiving Jongui at such a young age. Jongui was informed by Mok Soyang that there was no further information to obtain from Chung Myung. He made a kindly suggestion to them that they should head back inside because they were wasting their time on some nobody, but it was when Chung Myung excused himself and questioned Mok Soyang in an upset tone who he was and why Mok Soyang kept calling him brat that he drew everyone's attention. He acted as if he was infuriated. As a result of this, both Jongui and Mok Soyang were rendered incapable of speaking. Mok Soyang found it hard to believe that Chung Myung did not recognize him. As a result, he questioned Chung Myung about whether or not the question was meant for him. In response, Chung Myung asked Mok Soyang whether or not there was anybody other than him who kept calling him a brat. As a result of this, Mok Soyang felt enraged and he expressed his displeasure to Chung Myung by telling him how dare someone like him be unable to identify an elder from a Southern Edge sect. But before you could complete speaking, Chung Myung also talked while picking at his ears. This cut him off. Before he could finish, he spoke with an expression on his face as if he did not care about Mok Soyang at all, and that he believed that he was a doctor or something, since he was acting like he knew everything there was to know about everything. Chung Myung then said that if such were the case, then he should suppose that Mok Soyang has a solution to heal Elder Huang's condition. This was his conclusion after Chung Myung considered the situation, but Mok Soyang did not say anything other than That Elder Huang was suffering from the illness because he did not follow the way of the Tao, and that the only treatment would be to execute the Taoist ceremony. Chung Myung said that it made sense and seemed reasonable. He advised them that if this were the case they should not waste any time and contact the members of the Wuding or Zhongyan sect, because those groups are experts in issues of this nature. Moksoyang nervously protested that there was no need for it and was ready to add anything more. But Chung Myung cut him off again by stating that there was no one who didn't know that the Manhwa sect and the Southern Edge sect do not specialize in those kinds of things. It was in everyone's best interest to delegate the performance of any rites that needed to be done to genuine Taoists. Chung Myung then turned to Zhongui with a smug expression on his face as he inquired whether or not they desired it to be as cost-effective as possible, because doing so would ensure that they were not taken advantage of in any manner. This sparked a notion in Jongui's head, but he chose to remain silent for the time being, while Mokseung's anger toward Chung Myung grew even more intense as he yelled at him to be quiet. Chung Myung seemed not to care and just apologized in a manner that was completely insincere because of Chung Myung's behavior. Moksoyang had no choice but to feel an increasing amount of rage. He then turned to Zhongui and requested that he drive Chung Myung away as soon as possible. This made Zhongui want to let out an audible sigh. Zhongui stared at Moksoyang with a serious expression on his face before responding. Moksoyang was visibly unable to respond. After Zhongui pointed out that he was at the Union Merchant Guild and not in the Southern Edge sect, Zhongui remarked that it was up to him how he should treat his guests. Zhongui posed a few questions to including one in which he inquired as to whether or not he could hear the specifics of the hint that could heal his father. As a result, Chung Myung responded by stating that according to what he had heard, Elder Huang had traveled quite a bit in the past, and that before becoming ill, he must have traveled to the Kilian Mountains during one of his travels. However, contrary to Chung Myung's expectations, he was wrong, which led to him experiencing a great deal of confusion. Chung Myung continued to speak while stuttering and said that as a result of this, Elder Huang must have been attacked on one of his previous travels. However, according to Zhongui, it was not the case either. Zhongui started having second thoughts about him as a result of Chung Myung's unclear judgments. Now not even a sliver of optimism that he had previously harbored remained as a consequence of this development. Moksoyang is overjoyed beyond measure, and he stated that he has already informed them that the Manhwa sect is a gang of thugs who people out of their money. On the other hand, Zhongui chose not to pay attention Mokseung's mumblings and instead simply told Chung Myung that he hoped the latter could comprehend the situation in which he found himself. He expressed his appreciation for his objectives, but he did not want him to know that he does not want to take the chance of having an amateur make his father's health even worse than it already is. Therefore, he requested that Chung Myung return. While the gate was closing slowly, he told Chung Myung that he would express his gratitude to the leader of the cult for taking his consideration into account. Despite this, Chung Myung had not yet given up and was attempting to prevent the gate from closing in spite of the fact that he had not yet laid eyes on Elder Huang's corpse. He immediately started describing its state. His entire body begins to flush and grow even more icier when someone presses on Elder Huang's skin. For a brief moment it turns slightly white, but it immediately returns to its normal red color before he lost consciousness. He experienced intense chills as if he were encased in ice and imprisoned in a cavern, in addition to having black dots on his glabella. He also has them on the nape of his neck and on the top of his head. As a result, Zhongui swiftly pulled back the door just as it was about to shut in a shock. He asked Chung Myung how he had obtained such information. Zhongyi's demeanor underwent a complete about-face, and he asked Chung Myung to accompany him inside, with the promise that he would show him the location of his father naturally. Maxing attempted to mediate the situation. However, Zhongui retorted that if they have such knowledge, then why haven't they treated his father yet? Moksoyang was unable to even deny the claim. Zhongui has stated that this issue is exclusively their responsibility, thus he has informed him that he would not permit them to interfere any further than is absolutely necessary, and he will take the required actions against the Southern Edge sect if they continue doing what they have been doing. Moksung became silent, and Chung Myung, who was standing in the background, wore a pleased expression on his face the entire time. Mokseung's reaction was similar to that of a child having a temper tantrum. He turned aside in irritation. Chung Myung took back the blanket that was covering Elder Huang's body as soon as he entered the house where Elder Huang was located, so that he could examine it. As soon as he saw the body, he had the impression that his condition was even more serious than he had first believed it would be. While he was combing Elder Huang's body, he was thinking that these signs seemed to be symptoms of the demon's blossom, but it would seem that it is an unfinished one. Elder Huang would not have lived through the year If he had been subjected to an attack with a high-level demonic art, Chung Myung then placed his hands on Elder Huang's crimson wrist and closed his eyes as he focused some of his Kai on the older man's arm. After that he was certain without a reasonable doubt that it was lacking something. Jongui, having observed Chung Myung pondering something, inquired as to whether or not it would be challenging. Chung Myung's statement that it wouldn't be hard to treat his father was a surprise to Jongui, who expected it to be more difficult. After all, this was what each and every doctor who had come there had informed Jongui. This came as a great surprise to him. Chung Myung reiterated that the process of curing Jongui's father, who appears to be in a state of great shock, will not be difficult. He stated that he had done several things to ensure his survival, such as taking some preventative steps. While he was saying that Elder Twang's skin gradually got paler than it had been previously, this once again absolutely astonished Jongui. While Chung Myung told him that he could cure him, but it would take some time, since he needed to go through a few stages to prepare for it, even though Jongui's mind was a complete mess. He persisted in asking Chung Myung what kind of preparation it was. Chung Myung retorted while grinning ear to ear that the two of them have to first consume some food for breakfast. Jongui questioned Chung Myung once more about his earlier inquiry concerning the type of preparation that Chung Myung was referring to as Chung Myung gorged himself like a pig. Chung Myung responded while still chewing his food by saying that it was nothing significant. As he gulped down the food first, he also mentioned that because it demands a lot of energy, it is essential for them to eat well. And he even remarked that the food is tasty. Jongui questioned whether or not he could put his faith in Chung Myung, however, after seeing what the other person had done before. He had no choice but to trust what was being said while Chung Myung was eating. He made the statement that if he was being completely truthful, Jongui's father was not the most pressing concern there. The fundamental issue at hand is determining what caused Jongui's father to become ill in the first place. Because of this, Chung Myung indicated to Jongui with the chicken that he wanted to interrogate him and stated that he intended to do so. He inquired of Jongui regarding the individual who was the most close to his father, the individual who is always present with Elder Huang regardless of whether he is awake or asleep, and regardless of whether they are traveling or not, or at the very least someone who at least be suspected if anything were to happen with him as an exception. Since he was the son, this perplexed Jongui, so he inquired of Chung Myung to the reasoning for his question. Chung Myung responded by saying that he would just state that he required it for the purposes of treatment. Jongui gives some serious thought to who else might fit the description given by Chung Myung in addition to himself, because there were so many people who had worked closely with his father. He reasoned that he could not be certain of anything. He assured Chung Myung that there would be at least 5 persons who would fall into the category of the person that Chung Myung had mentioned. After that, Chung Myung commented that it would be impossible to locate them at that time. While he had just finished the last piece of chicken right down to the bone, Jongui spoke to Chung Myung about what it is that he is looking for. Therefore, Chung Myung stopped chewing the food that was currently in his mouth and questioned Jongui about whether or not he genuinely did not know, and continued by saying that Elder Huang was not attacked by anyone from the outside. Based on how he was currently feeling, therefore, to put it another way, it was the devilry of an insider, and as a consequence of this, Jongui could not help warning him to watch what he said. He asserted that everyone in the EUNHA Merchant Guild treats one another as members of their own families. They have spent their entire lives with them, and as a result everyone has a lot of regard for his father. Chung Myung set down his chopsticks and mumbled something to the effect that if it wasn't the devil, then it didn't matter what it was. What Chung Myung stated to Jongui in an effort to calm him down was that they would suspect them, and if he were mistaken then it would be a relief. Jongui agreed with what Chung Myung said, but he still had reservations. But Chung Myung advised him to take it easy and not worry too much about the situation, since after he investigates it everything will become clear. He did this while picking his teeth with a toothpick. Taking into consideration Elder Huang's current state, it can be deduced that anyone who employed demonic arts in a way that was lacking has been continuously exposing the older to demonic Kai. Since there wouldn't have been any problems in the beginning, he must have been exposed to it for a very long period of time before it became an issue. Chung Myung had just finished pondering all of that. Jongui interrupted Chung Myung's train of thought by asking him how he intends to proceed with the investigation. Chung Myung merely stated that it would be exactly the same as what they were doing at this very moment, and that all Jongun needed to do was sit and observe, given that a lot of exciting things are going to take place very soon. After that, Chung Myung recalled that he needed Jongui to complete something, and he had something for Jongui to do. Jongui said that regardless of what it is, he will give it his all, and Chung Myung chuckled as he asked for a bottle of Yonti whiskey to be brought to him. Moksoyang, on the other hand, who was also eating at the time, broke his chopsticks in an angry. That is the end of chapter 23. Stay tuned for the next one. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Thank you everyone.